The material and information contained within the Chatting with Cumberland podcast is for general information purposes only. You should not rely upon the material or information on the website as a basis for making any business, legal, or other decisions. While we endeavor to keep the content and resources of Chatting with Cumberland current and accurate, the Cumberland Board of County Commissioners, Administration, and all departments and affiliates make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to services, show content, and guest opinions contained on the Chatting with Cumberland for any purpose. The views and opinions expressed on the show are not representative of that of county commissioners, administration, or employees unless expressly specified. The Chatting with Cumberland podcast will be discussing sensitive topics such as suicide, sexual abuse, drug use, mental health, and domestic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Hi, everybody. This is Chatting with Cumberland. Today's special guest in the hot seat. They said it never happened. She's here. Commissioner Christine Norbut-Beyer of the Department of Children and Families. Christine, how are you today?
Yeah, very good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. We're really excited to have you for our Season 2 closer of Chatting with Cumberland. We want to thank everybody who tuned in. A lot of people have been waiting for this moment, so we're so happy that you're here. And I'm sorry I stood you up because I got sick, so thank you for being such a good sport.
No, it's perfectly fine. I'm just happy you're healthy and everybody's doing well, so better to be delayed and than, to risk anyone else getting sick. So
Sure.
It's all good.
Thank you for being such a good sport. Just a little background. Commissioner Beyer and I met back in January in ChildStat, which is a review, right, of our system kayaks and essentially, how well they're doing in each county and, what risk factors seem to come at the top of the list and what issues that are dealing with. It was very eye-opening. And essentially that was the time when Chatting with Cumberland was born. And the idea, do you remember that, Chris?
Yeah,
when we talked about
I remember you telling me all about it, that you were planning it.
Right. And from day one, you've been a believer and a supporter, and you're here now. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So as I got around to talking to a few of our system partners and folks that work within our system, I was hoping to do a segment on getting to know you. Not as a commissioner, but just as a regular person.
I am a regular person.
Right. And sometimes, do you feel that having a title of commissioner sometimes sets a tone when you let's say you walk into a room of families and people that it might be a little difficult to navigate in the beginning because of what
I think the thing about having the title, sometimes it feels that way. Like sometimes it feels like there's an expectation or people are expecting a certain persona or a certain, me to show up in a certain way. And I drive myself, I always am like not with an entourage. I come by myself. Yeah. My favorite time is my opportunities to meet directly with parents. And, I'll tell you, I had a listening tour that I went on, started in 2018, going around, and I had the opportunity to talk to close to 700 parents now, and, that are involved in one way or another with the department. Right. And I went into one of our offices, I won't say which county, and there were probably about 20 parents there waiting for me, and we had 2 sessions that were going to be taking place that night. And the security guard in the building said to me, "Do you need me to sit in with you? You're going by yourself?" And I kind of laughed, and I said, "No, I'm fine." And he said, "Well, you're really brave." And I said, "I'm not sure you understand what this work really is about if you think that the commissioner sitting down with parents is somehow either I should be fearful or, what does that say about how our staff and the people we hire maybe treat our parents or think about parents." And, I think at that point for me, it really became kind of a mission in some ways to make sure that we incorporate family voice in a different way, that that I have the opportunity to get out and see parents and meet with everybody who has any interest in anything that we do in the department, and meet them at their level, meet them where they are, versus somehow, coming in with the attitude of, I'm the commissioner.
Sure.
And so, and I'll tell you, the most humbled I am is by my children. I have two
Amen.
kids, and every time they're like, what does that mean? Like, why
Yeah.
do people like call you that, or they'll call you commissioner? And my son thinks it's hysterical, So
I was going to ask you, for the folks listening, what does commissioner mean? What essentially is entailed with the title? What work makes you the commissioner, and who do you speak with more on a regular basis in government to kind of lead the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the title of commissioner is just that you're a part of the governor's cabinet. That, and Department of Children and Families being the cabinet level department that's focused on children. I mean, it's a fairly new department, only since 2006. And, but I think being commissioner is, the opportunity to kind of set policy and drive practice or drive particular outcomes. And so, I feel very lucky that I've been able to surround myself and hire people that have very similar views as me, and really think about child welfare and child protective services as an opportunity to also help families and strengthen families. And but I think I spend most time with my senior leadership. That really is who I'm talking to all the time, because we're looking at outcomes and driving towards those outcomes. And then the governor's policy leads, it's talking with them also about, this is different ideas or things that we would like to see happen, what we believe, would improve services for families. It's always trying to work toward the governor's goal of a stronger and fairer New Jersey.
Right.
And so, our piece of it within children and families, it's how do we work with families locally,
Sure.
and then at the same time, what are the policy initiatives that we want to present to the governor,
Sure.
that we want him to be helping us drive?
When I, as a professional, when people ask me, what do you do for a living, to say, well, I'm a youth services administrator, and I'm going, everyone gives me this look, and I've realized, like, what does that even mean, right? So these days I just say I'm an engineer, right? I build bridges, right? And a problem solver, and I work with kids. And it sounds like you have a lot of that as well.
Absolutely.
Now, with DCF, you have, of course, the Division of Children Protection and Permanency, right? Child Protection and Permanency. But there's also, it's a bigger umbrella. You have multiple divisions, right? So what are some of the other divisions that you have aside from what people formerly know as DIFAS or DCPP?
Yeah. So that's the largest. DCP&P is the largest of the three divisions that are the main divisions. Family and Community Partnerships is the division focused on prevention and really what I'm calling upstream work.
Sure.
And that's like our home visiting programs, school-based youth service programs, services that families don't have to be involved with DCP&P. They just, within their own local community or school, the Family Success Centers are also funded and part of Family and Community Partnerships. So that's just available to anybody, anywhere in New Jersey, because those services exist statewide.
Sure.
And then we have the Children's System of Care, which is really the New Jersey public mental health system for children. So it's mental health, substance use disorders, and services for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
So
and
it's a wide range.
I was going to say there's a continuum of services there from, in-home, in community, all the way through out-of-home, congregate, residential treatment.
And, Chris, one of the things that we do here at Chatting with Cumberland is about family engagement, right? So, similar to our system partners, it was kind of the origin and heart of the project. And to reach us at Chatting with Cumberland, please send in your questions or your video boxes to chattingwithcumberland@gmail.com. We have a few questions that were submitted. They keep coming in. There's a lot of them, so we hope we get to as many as we possibly can. But I'd like to ask you a few questions that were sent in from a few folks.
Sure.
So the first question came from April DiPietro. She's a director of community partnerships. And she wants to ask, with the pandemic, How are you planning to celebrate the holidays?
How am I planning? Well, I'll tell you for Thanksgiving, because we were thinking that the first time I would have been on the show would have been even before that. My husband's family, we actually celebrated Thanksgiving in October outside, and that was really nice to be able to like just all get together, but socially distanced. We all brought our own food and, had an opportunity. And now that the numbers are rising as we're heading toward Christmas, it's going to be very quiet at my house this year. So it's just going to be myself and my husband and my 2 children. And we have a daughter my stepdaughter, my husband's daughter, goes to school in Minnesota, and she's not going to be coming home for Christmas. So that's really hard on him. And we're going to really miss her. But we feel like we want to be safe. We want to keep we both have both sets of parents still alive. We want to keep our parents safe. And we know that, we're going to sacrifice this year, but have the opportunity then to be able to give everybody big hugs.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the next few months, but it's going to be quiet. And
Sure.
I won't lie, I'm kind of looking forward to
Yeah.
having it be a little low key.
My wife said the same thing, and you know what? I did it, and I was like, that wasn't so bad. We did the same thing home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
enjoyed it. It was a little bit more intimate, but we certainly feel that as well.
Yeah.
My sister won't be able to come home from Buffalo, and she's a doctor up there, and the same situation.
We will do our Zoom calls and, get everybody together on Zoom and,
Yeah.
so still be able to connect, just not, the same as we have in the past.
Right. So what made you get into your line of work, and what is the favorite part of your job?
What made me get into, well, I'm a social worker by training. And, I always tell everyone I graduated from Stockton. And when I went to Stockton, I started out as a marketing major. I was convinced that I was going to be a business major and I was going to do fashion merchandising. It's what I was interested in at the time. And then my freshman year, I got a D in my marketing class. And I thought, I got to rethink this because this is not interesting at all. And I ended up doing an internship. I worked with my dad at DuPont in the summers when I was in college. And I did that internship, the human resources folks, came around and they did training for all of their workforce, and they did training on substance use disorders in the workplace, and they had a domestic violence seminar, and it was so fascinating to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, how do I get into that line of work? And then I started researching and realized that I could be a social worker, and social workers did a lot more than working for the Board of Social Services. And so it was really kind of I kind of fell into it in that way. But I'm happy to report, my intro to social work class, I ended up getting an A, and then I had straight A's and Dean's List, and
You found your pond.
and that was
it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It really shows. I can tell that you're very passionate about your work. You're very approachable. And for me, that goes a long way in government. I mean, I think approachability is important because, you can't essentially win somebody's heart until, you win their mind. You know what I mean? So if you're able to communicate and have an open door policy, I think the work that you do is more effective, and your presence is important. And another question that we had here for you that I wanted to ask was, if you could change one thing about the children's system of care in New Jersey, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh.
It's a good one, right?
Only one?
That was a good one. If you had to pick
Only
like the
one
top
thing.
one thing that you could just snap your finger and change, what would it be?
Can I do two?
All right.
Because I will say the first one is making it more widely available and accessible, and that people know about it, because honestly, it's still like the best kept secret in the state. It's amazing to me how many people don't know that it exists, and that any parent, anytime when their child's in crisis, can pick up the phone and call and get services. Like, it's amazing to me. And actually we just did a fantastic PSA that will be coming out that I'm super excited about to really help promote it to like just the general population. But the other thing I would say is why I want to is because infant mental health. We need to be doing more for around infant mental health, social and emotional learning, and, really partnering with the Department of Education and starting that really early in the lives of children. And, right now our services really don't start for children until above the age of 5.
Okay.
And I would say even closer to maybe like 7 or 8. So that's an area we're really going to be diving into.
I love it. So part of getting lifted here at Chatting with Cumberland is our video box. We have some more questions to ask for Commissioner Christine Norbut-Beyer. So what we do is put on the cans here.
Okay.
And you're going to get to hear the first question from Terry Black. She's our kayak chair, which is the Children's Interagency Coordinating Council in the group that I work with. And we're going to go ahead and play that for you and get your response. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Sounds good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Chatting with Cumberland. My name is Terry Black. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Cumberland County Kayak. And before I turn it over to our hosts, Melissa and Frank, I'd like to welcome our very special guest, the Commissioner of the Division of Children and Families, Christine Norbut-Beyer. I'd like to start us off with a question that I've heard many times over the past several months. With all the things that our kids have to deal with in today's society, and now especially in light of the challenges brought on by the pandemic, what are some of the things that you are working on with the governor and the division to bring children's mental health to the forefront?
And that was an excellent question there from Miss Terry Black.
So I think that there's a lot of things. The pandemic really has brought to light a lot of, I think, issues with children that have always been there, but they're being exacerbated, or we're seeing an increase in children's anxiety and depression as a result of social isolation, the social distancing, not having an opportunity to participate in school activities or sporting events, and things that really, I think, are very helpful for development and children's overall just social and emotional development, and then their mental well-being. And so within the department, we really are looking at the issues around youth suicide and trying to do more around the prevention of youth suicide, which really is strong mental health services and supports. And so we have a number of awareness campaigns. We're constantly putting material out on our social media. We worked with the Department of Education. We actually created a Q code. I think that's what it is.
QR code?
A QR code. Thank you. Thank you. That's when I show my age, when I don't know technology, the right terminology. But a QR code that, teachers, when they were teaching in the classroom, they actually, through Zoom, could put it up like in the class, and or on the screen behind them, and then students can put their phone up to it and get a whole host of resources and phone numbers and services available to them. But I think it's also looking at working to strengthen the children's system of care by offering services and supports to a younger population, making sure that everyone knows that the mobile response and stabilization services are available to them, available to parents. We still have those programs going out on site. Either those meetings can be done virtually or still in person. So I think that there's a number of services and supports that were in existence that are continuing, but really, we've been doing so much at the department through COVID around tracking data and looking at our outcomes. And we changed a lot of the data that now we're tracking as a result of COVID, things that we really are more concerned about and wanting to make sure that, we're staying on top of. And it's going to help drive our priorities into the next year.
Yeah.
So youth mental health was one of the, on the top of our list in the priorities that I just shared with the governor's office maybe 2 weeks ago for what are we going to be working on next year.
So do you feel that this is a trickle up or a trickle down solution, or maybe somewhere in the middle?
I think, well, I'm not really sure what you mean by that.
So, in other words, do you think that government should set the standard using the professionals, right, and allow it to trickle down, as most things typically do? Or do you feel that the priority should be put on the front line, right, with that directive from government and work its way up to what's happening out on the field? Because there seems to be a lot of pivoting going on right now, of course, with COVID and what's happening, right? And what I mean by that is how much emphasis in the newer planning is focused on the frontline workers, those social workers.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so one of the things, I don't know that it's top down or bottom up. I think it's a combination of the two. I think one of the things that's really important to me is to be able to hear directly from our constituents, from parents, from young people about what they're experiencing as a result of COVID. What are some of the struggles that maybe they had before that are exacerbated, or what are new struggles that, they didn't have before. And so now people, are having to reach out for services and supports that they didn't even know existed, or they've never had to do before. And so I think the more that we in government can be listening to families directly, talking with our providers about what the providers are hearing from families in the community, what are the requests for services that are coming in. Through COVID, I've, continued to have Zoom calls and meetings with providers, all, that provide services across all of our divisions within the department, asking about, where are the most requests coming from. And that's what we're trying to use then, that information from community, to be able to drive then what the priorities are.
And that makes a lot of sense. And Terry, thank you for submitting that question. We have another one. You ready for another one?
Yep.
The next one is from Mr. Hakeem Shahid, formerly known as Midget Moley.
Greetings. My name is Hakeem Ali Abdul Shahid, formerly known as Midget Moley, from Atlantic County. I also did reside in Cumberland County for some time back in the 80s on 2nd Street. I owned some property there, and also did some work down there, speaking at the schools and different youth centers when I was released from prison after spending nearly 20 years there. I want to thank Frank, who I met a few years ago and has been in touch with him since then. We had some amazing conversations, and I'm really proud of what he's doing, especially with the podcast. He's really doing a great job there, him and Beth, and I look forward to one day being host on the show. And one of the main questions I have is that what is, I guess we call them DIFAS, and I think they call it something now, Division of Child, Family, and Department of Children and Family Services. But one of the questions I had was what is that service, that child service, doing for incarcerated parents? What are some of the prevention programs that you think will help the children most?
And that one was from Midget Moley.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Not enough. That's my initial response to that is I don't think we're doing enough, but our work is improving in that area, recognizing that, incarcerated parents really have the right and the opportunity to continue to be parents to their children. And so, we will bring children or supervise visits in, when parents are incarcerated. If they're open and active with DCPMP, children are going to visit their parents in prison. But I had an opportunity, gosh, I bet it was about a year ago now, to go to the Edna Mann Women's Correctional Facility and meet with residents there, incarcerated women, and listen to them about their experiences with DCPMP and, what some of the challenges and things that they face. And the number one issue that came up was the fact that when parents are incarcerated for years, right? I mean, if it's more than 2 years, they're outside of the federal ASFA timeframes
Right.
for adoption
Right.
or for reunification attempts. And so parents were saying that, they're really fearful that they're going to lose their children to adoption because of being incarcerated. And even though they maintain that familial bond, or they have a parent, a grandparent who's caring for their children, that they're really being pushed to move towards adoption. And so we're doing a lot in the state now from a policy and a practice perspective to move towards using kinship legal guardianship and doing more for kin and with kin, so that we're not having to terminate parental rights as a result of parents being incarcerated, and so not having the ability to work towards reunification for that time. And so we think that will really help continue to keep those bonds intact and in place when parents are incarcerated. And, one of the other things we talked about was partnering with the Department of Corrections around having more supports in prisons, both in the men's and women's prisons, around parenting classes. And I don't just mean parenting classes like, you do 10 weeks and you're out, but really helping engage parents while they are incarcerated to work through some of their own issues, some things that, they're concerned about when they then are released and come back into the community. Thinking about, one of my deputies talks about, we need to have almost like a mobile family success center or some kind of mobile service that is in the parking lot of any of our prisons in New Jersey on visitation days, so that we're getting to community, we're getting to parents, we're recognizing like what do they need.
They have that in Florida.
Do they?
Yeah, they do. There's a model that exists, and here in Cumberland we do Recovery on Wheels, bringing substance use services to the community in a similar bus. So I think that approach seems to be working, and I think it's a great idea.
So I think that there's a number of things that we can be doing both to support people who are incarcerated, helping them prepare for when they're released. And at the same time, if we can connect to their family in the community, and not through DCP&P, it doesn't have to be through child protection and permanency. The fact that we have the other divisions, family and community partnership, the children's system of care, there's opportunities for us to be able to provide services and support families in a way that is not as threatening as I think people worry and fear. The protective service side. And so that's the shift that we're trying to make, that the Department of Children and Families is not just DCP&P. That's one piece of the work that we do.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Commissioner Beyer. We're going to break the show up a little bit and do something very special for our guests. We're going to introduce our very first segment called 3 Levels. And we're going to talk about ACEs, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And we have a few special guests, including my son, who will be starting the show with Commissioner Beyer. So we'll be right back for that segment. Stay tuned.
So what exactly is ACEs? Like, what exactly is it?
So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what that means is that there are like 10 categories of bad things that can happen to kids in their life. And so, sometimes children live in environments where they get hurt, or they live in homes where there's a lot of violence in their family, or they have a parent who has mental health issues or substance use issues that keep them from being able to really care for their children the way that we would want them to, or that children need to be cared for. And so when children live with that kind of adversity or that kind of, trauma in their early life, it really has an impact on how their brain develops, how they develop emotionally, how they present themselves in school and just to the world around them. And, we know that children who have a lot of adversity or a lot of ACEs growing up have, unfortunately, when they become adults, they maybe don't do as well in school, so they have lesser education, or they might have their own physical health conditions and disorders, greater rates of heart disease. And so what happens to you as a child has a lifelong impact and kind of carries with you into your adulthood. And so why we're trying so hard to fight against ACEs and adverse childhood experiences is to be able to protect children from that. And the best way that, we can do that is to help their parents and help strengthen parents and strengthen families and strengthen communities by providing services and programs and, all kinds of support that help the parents be able to function better, to be able to then be able to be a great caretaker for their kids. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So ACEs, you want to stop from happening to children because it'll affect them in the long run.
Exactly.
Okay. So my second question would be, so your job specifically is to stop ACEs and make kids have a better adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some ways that you help parents to stop ACEs with children?
So some of the ways are if a parent is, has mental health issues and, we want to make sure that they get counseling, that they have access to counseling, that they can help learn coping skills or coping techniques, maybe not to get so angry with their children, or to be able to, if a parent has a substance use disorder, to be able to help get them treatment, to, get them into recovery, or to help them stop drinking or stop using drugs. And, ultimately then that's going to help the family, help the children. But sometimes it's just, having parents having someone to talk to. It doesn't always have to be really severe or extreme, conditions. It can just be, parents having someone, to help them manage their everyday stress, or help them, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a way to say it that is really easily understood. I think as much as we can support parents and help parents to be, the best of themselves and the best that they can be, then they're going to be able to be there for their children. So we do fund a lot of programs and a lot of supports and a lot of services for families and parents to take advantage of. But, ultimately it's how do we help them be better parents?
Okay, so you help parents be the best parents that they could be.
Mm-hmm.
And you have multiple programs to help parents become better at what they do. So, how long usually does a parent take to become the best parent that they can when under different kind of circumstances?
Well, I don't know, Nico. I have a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old, and if you ask them, I'm still working toward being the best parent I can be. So I think that, parenthood is not easy. Being a parent is one of the hardest jobs that there is. And so every parent needs support. And so it doesn't, sometimes it can be short term and it's just a few months of help that somebody needs. And other times it could be years. People who have substance use disorders, sometimes it takes them many, many years of trying to stop using drugs or trying to stop drinking. And they maybe do good for a little while, and then something happens and they start using again. And so sometimes it takes years, but that's why, if we can do more to support parents and families in their community, close to home, with their neighbors, and through schools and local businesses. I mean, everybody in the community can come together to help support one another. And, if that happens and people start lifting parents up, it really, the more support we can provide to people throughout their life, the better.
Okay. So I think another question I have is when did you start doing your job? When did you get your job? And how long have you been doing it?
When did I get this job as commissioner?
Yeah.
In 2018, January 2018. So it's just been about 2.5, almost 3 years. Gosh, 3 years now that I've been the commissioner.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like a really long time, and sometimes it doesn't feel long enough.
Really?
Yep.
So what do you like most about your job?
I like most about my job being able to do things like this, being able to, get out and meet parents and children, youth who participate in the programs that we fund or that we've developed, because it really helps to, I want to say it helps to ground me, but it helps me to be able to then learn, what do people need? What do people in New Jersey need? What do families need? What do young people need? And then that kind of helps set the course of our policies and our programs. And that's what gives me, ideas to be able to go to the governor and say, I think we need to focus in, this particular area, or I have a great idea for a policy because this is what parents and kids told me that they need. So having opportunities like this is probably the best part of my job.
Yeah, so do you what's the funnest thing about your job? What do you?
The funnest thing, gosh, I think what's really fun right now is we created a youth council. And so I have 20 young people that grew up in foster care or lived in foster care for a period of time. So they had a lot of adversity in their own childhood. And so now those kids are now in their late teens and early 20s. And I get to meet with them probably every other month. I sit with them, or now on Zoom, for a couple hours. And that's the most fun, because they are really funny and have really great ideas about, the work in the department and how it can shape the work. But just getting to listen to them and watching them, we did a holiday party and they were building gingerbread houses, and sometimes in some of them it was the first time they've ever done that before. And, they're in their 20s. And so just being able to sit and participate in new experiences or bring experiences to young people that they've not had before. So I would say that's the most fun in my job now, being able to do that.
So I guess another question I would have now is, do you have any really memorable job experiences, something that happened and was memorable?
Just as commissioner, or you mean in my whole time as being a social worker? Does it matter?
No, it's that's just kind of memory you had.
I think, some of the good memories I have are hearing from parents that, I personally worked with, or, that I made a difference, or something I said or something I did, made a difference in their life and how they think about themselves, or how they think about, their own parenting. And because I think that's the great thing about being a social worker, and in the job that I'm in now. I have the opportunity to meet so many people, and I get to interact with people and impact them in ways that I don't even realize sometimes. And so when I have people send me emails, or, send me a card and tell me about, something I said or did and how it empowered them or encouraged them, I think that's probably the best thing about the work that I do and the job that I do.
So thank you for answering my questions, Commissioner, and I was really excited to meet you, and now it pays off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nico. It was nice meeting you too.
Bye.
And thanks for sending me those great videos leading up to being here with you today. It
You're
got me
welcome.
really excited about being able to have the conversation, but, also get to see you with your dad and interacting with your dad. It was really fun.
So we're back for level 2 of 3 levels, and that is with a young professional. And courtesy of COVID, you get me today. We were hoping to have some more people here in the studio, but we had to tone it down a little bit, understandably. So I'm going to be your second level. So one of the things we talked about regarding ACEs was, maybe divorce of parents, suicide, substance use, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that you mentioned in one of your interviews I had watched back in 2018 with Steve Audubado was toxic stress that doesn't lead to the attention of DCF. Mm-hmm. That happens on a regular basis. I thought that was interesting to talk about. What do you think toxic stress, how does toxic stress affect people on a day-to-day basis, and now more so because of the pandemic?
Well, I think stress, right? Everybody has stress in their life, and stresses can be good also. Coming into doing an interview, your cortisol level goes up, your stress rises a little bit because you want to do a good job. And so, stress is really helpful to us as humans in a lot of ways. And, it also prepares you if you're crossing the street and a car comes really fast, it's like the reaction to get you to jump out of the way. And so, the reactions in your body, I think, are normal. The challenge is when it becomes toxic is when you have that feeling of fear or that feeling of the car speeding at you repeatedly, multiple times a day, a week, a month, and then it keeps, happening year over year. That's toxic stress. That's what leads to children with severe adversity being impacted in their development, in their education and learning. And so toxic stress, I think, there are many people who live with that kind of, that level of fear or that level of stress that doesn't rise to the level of, a phone call to the hotline. If in fact it's not translating to abuse and neglect of their children. Right. And so that's really when a call would come to DCP&P, and then we would be investigating that. But, there are many people that are in, abusive relationships. There are many people who have severe adversity in their childhood that now maybe they don't have that in their adulthood, but they still are triggered. There's still things that now later in life, even though they are safe, they don't necessarily perceive themselves as being safe, or they may see something, whether they see it or they smell, all of your senses are heightened during stressful times and experiences. And so as a result of that, into adulthood, people can be triggered, or their trauma, past traumas can be kind of brought to the surface. Yeah. And so I think that's how, toxic stress then shows up in, how people present themselves in the community or at work or however.
Well, it took me to the age of 36, I'm 36 now, to realize that I have trauma in my life. The thing about that's tricky with trauma that I've realized in substance use disorder, as Melissa Niles, who will be on the show later also, told me about, was that substance use disorder and anxiety and depression are insidious. Mm-hmm. There's a blind side involved sometimes, where as a child, if your environment portrays a certain traumatic behavior that you're unaware of, a lot of times in molestation cases, substance use cases, domestic violence cases, if it's an everyday occurrence or a fairly regular occurrence, it becomes normalized. So when you remove yourself from that environment, it's tough to realize that you have trauma until you're able to remove yourself from it. And that's what's really tricky about mental health and stuff, even as a young professional, that I'm realizing. And here, live and direct, you know me, the crazy idea guy, right? I had an idea I wanted to pitch to you live, and this is new. No one has heard it before, but maybe you tell me, yeah, it could work, or maybe, yeah, you need to work on it a little bit. But it involves one of the topics we talked about earlier in the show, which is mobile response. And I couldn't agree with you more when you said that, and I smiled that, that there's this number that you can call, right? The Perform Care number. And they'll dispatch someone to you within 1 hour anywhere in New Jersey, licensed clinicians that can help you, coaches that can open you up with the services through our great children's system of care and mobile response, right? So here's my pitch. When something criminal or something bad happens, what's the number that you call first?
911.
Right. Everybody knows 911, right? But not everybody knows the Perform Care number by heart, right? When there's a lesser emergency. So my idea is, I submit to you that mobile response get in conjunction with law enforcement. And when there's an emergency that happens, there could be like a classification, right? Like, there's certain ones that obviously they're not going to come out to if it's like a bomb or something crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, most domestic violence stuff, substance use stuff, whatever. How about the 911 operators route that call to the mobile response team simultaneously so they both show up? It removes a few steps. The law enforcement can, resolve any immediate threat, and then mobile response can come in right after and say, hey, you had this incident. We offer these services for this type of stuff. What do you think about that idea?
Well, I think you must be a visionary because it's something that we're looking at piloting in Cape May County.
Wow. Okay. And here I thought I had an original idea.
It is an original idea because you wouldn't have known about that, right? Like really nobody knows about that. And it's something specifically we were talking about Cape May because in Middle Township, the chief of police there, Chris Lusner, has been very focused and committed on ACEs and trauma-informed care. And they have the Handle with Care protocol with the AG's office now that, they've been doing
We
there.
just launched it in Cumberland.
Now we're going to be doing it statewide. But because there's kind of like, a number of things happening in Cape May with the chief of police and his police force, and we're looking at particularly in certain types of cases where, the police get a call that then mobile response would get a call or mobile response would be going out with them. But you have to remember that really mobile response is for, children.
Right.
And so would be instances where a child or an adolescent is involved or needs supports or services, or depending upon what the issue is, we know that, it's something that children are going to need some support. And so, so you didn't even know, Frank, but I'll let you take credit for it when it comes to Cumberland.
Right on. That's the spirit.
So, hi, I'm Melissa Niles. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor. And I also happen to be the department head for Cumberland County Department of Human Services. And I'm very pleased to be here today with DCF Commissioner Christine Norbut-Beyer. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I'm going to continue the segment on 3 levels. And I'm going to ask you about relating to professionals, how to understand and frame the impact of substance use disorder and the 10 categories or the criteria, which the audience may or may not know. So if we could just touch on the 10 criteria
Yeah, sure.
and how that might impact or influence a parent developing a substance use disorder, and how it would impact a young person growing up in that type of environment.
Sure. So I think what's really important to understand about ACEs is that the ACEs test, I'll say, or the
screening tool.
The screening tool. Thank you. Better than saying test because you can't fail it. But that screening tool is really about what happened as an adult. You fill it out, and it's about what happened in your home environment, right? It's really about violence or neglect, abuse that occurs in a family home, like in a family situation. And so I say that because, there are many people that have substance use disorders, or even if it's not a disorder, I mean, there are many families where, people are functional alcoholics and they go to work, and, most people outside of the family don't even know that they have, a substance use issue. It becomes a problem, and when it impacts negatively on the children or on the functioning in the family. And that's where then, if a parent doesn't have protective factors or isn't protecting their children, but actually causing them harm or causing them, allowing them to be abused or being neglectful, is when ACEs form in young people. And so I think that, that's almost like the criteria, because there are people that I know that I have met that have 10 ACEs. And they are super high performing, very functional CEOs of organizations.
Right.
And so they overcame that adversity because they had another caring adult who helped to support them through that, adversity or through that abuse or, whatever they were experiencing in their family or in their home life. And that can be an aunt or an uncle, it can be someone else in your extended family. It can be a parent. I mean, you can have a father or a mother who has, is abusive or violent or has a substance use disorder that really negatively impacts the children or impacts the family functioning. But if the other parent has the protective factors and is supportive of the children, and that can help mitigate ACEs. And so I think that is really what I want people to know about ACEs, that no matter what your childhood was like or how many ACEs somebody identifies for themselves on the screening tool, that doesn't necessarily put them in a category of, having to suffer as an adult, because there are programs and supports and, having an adult in your life, that it could be a teacher or a coach, somebody who really is there to listen, to care about you, to, all of those, what I'm going to say again, are protective factors that really are supporting children and help, even with stress in their home or with trauma in their home. ACEs don't have to be kind of a negative that, impacts people negatively through their entire adulthood.
Okay, thank you. So as I was listening to your response, I began to think about, and I started to feel gratitude because, and at the same time, it's hard to believe that it took the human race this long to start to acknowledge, because we are only beginning.
That's right.
Right? To acknowledge trauma and its impact. And in your response, the way you were framing it, I noticed that you put the power of the solution not into clinicians and outside forces and institutions, but you put it back within the one other positive adult in the child's life. That's the first go-to for the children's system of care model now, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because we also realize, and I think it's important for the people to know this because they may not know, because there's a lot of fear involved, right?
Yeah.
With authorities being involved in my
right.
family and my children's life. But with your perspective and your mission is to keep the family together and to strengthen the families, to give the parents the tools to go in and do the trauma repair work.
Absolutely.
And not to remove children, because that in itself
Is a trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge with protective service work, not just in New Jersey, but in the whole country. And, what child welfare systems are really struggling with. And, I've been working on this both before I was in the role of commissioner, when I worked for Casey Family Programs nationally. So probably for the last 10 years, I've really been studying and understanding ACEs and trauma, but also then, looking at moving toward child welfare, moving toward really strengthening families and being a support for families. And that if we can build strong families, that in and of itself is a protective factor for children.
It sure
and
is.
so if we can build up parents and give them the tools that they need, and sometimes that may be, economic. It may be helping somebody find stable housing in order to then start to feel better about themselves, in order to be able to focus on maybe an underlying mental health condition or a substance use issue where, they have the basics that they need to live and support their family, and then they can start to work on themselves.
Right,
and so
exactly.
I think that there's I think no greater work and no more important work for our department than really to be strengthening families. And that's how we're going to protect children. And that's how we keep children safe, not by removing them and putting them into
Right.
foster care. Now, there are times where children may have to be removed for their own safety. But even when that happens, we've really begun to move towards trying to keep them then with family or keeping them with kin or a family friend or somebody that they know, to really try and reduce that trauma to the child and to the family, because we know as soon as we remove a child, we've done irreparable damage.
Yes.
And so, someone had said to me, it's like, if you drop a teacup and you break it, you can repair it. You can put it back together, you can glue it, you can use it again, but it will never be the same and it will never be as strong as it was originally.
Yes.
And I think that is why it's so important for me in the role that I'm in now to be able to try and come up with solutions and programming and just help educate the general public about ACEs and about being trauma informed, and how everybody, I think, can play a part in that to be able to keep families together, support families in their community locally, so that they don't become a call to the hotline.
Right. Yes. Thank you. So 2 things. So I absolutely agree. You spoke about the hierarchy of needs, right? So basically, that's clinician talk, but really what that just means is it's like on a pyramid. So the basic primary needs of a human being are to have shelter, food, right? So that's the base. And if I don't have my basic needs met, I cannot go on to work on anything else, such as social, emotional, and way at the top is like reaching my full potential.
Self-actualization.
Self-actualization. So if my basic needs aren't met, I'm not going to, and think of like the baby boomers, and I think of my grandparents and even my parents to a degree, where they didn't have time to feel sorry for themselves, or they had to tuck it away somewhere and not address that trauma, right? Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep marching, because being depressed or anxious is a luxury that I can't afford because I have to go get a job. I'm worried about, I have to have a roof over my head, food in my stomach, and, take care of my family. So being innovative and adjusting from a clinician's, like how we do traditional treatment, realizing that all these are all parts, and some of them must come before. Because, the term counseling and such also, it has like a taboo and things like that. So just learning how, as a clinician, and teaching the clinicians how to be with the families is very important. And the second part, I don't remember.
Well, as you were talking, though,
maybe it'll come back to me.
I was going to say, but as you were talking, one of the things that, started to come up for me also is, we talk a lot about ACEs and adverse childhood experiences. But what we haven't talked about, other than talking, saying supporting families and helping to strengthen them, and sometimes it's through a traditional program like a counseling or therapy, and other times it's really just having people feel listened to, feeling that you have somebody to talk to, somebody who understands, and so, being trauma informed, recognizing that people have trauma in their life that we may not know about. And, it's something that when I really started this journey of learning about ACEs and learning about becoming trauma informed, and I like to talk about it as being healing centered. And so a lot of the work that we're doing at the department now and with the new Office of Resiliency is about, being healing centered, leaving people
Nice.
better than when we found them, right? It's everything is about, trying to heal past wounds. But, it's to the point where now my children have heard me talking about it enough. Like everything in my house is a lesson. They get, really annoyed because I'm constantly trying to teach something. But, I'll give you an example. We'll be at the supermarket. And I know many people have experienced this where, you're standing online, you're ready to check out, and either in front of you or off to the side, there's somebody who is really agitated in the line. Or, if you're in the no more than 15 items lane and somebody has 18 items, the person behind them is like really getting very upset and agitated. And, when I was younger, before I started to understand kind of the impact of trauma and how people are triggered, I would say like, what's wrong with that person, right? Like, what is wrong with them? Like, it's really minor, and they're getting so overly upset about something so minor. And, now I understand that it's not about what's wrong with them. It's about what happened to them. And something could have happened 5 minutes prior to walking into the supermarket. They could have gotten bad news about themselves. They could have gotten bad news about, a family member being ill, or they could have just gotten fired from their job, or, any number of things that that happen to humans, in our daily lives. And the next thing that they did was go to the grocery store, and they're just not able to regulate themselves. But it really has nothing to do with the person in front of them having 18 items on the conveyor belt instead of 15. And so I find that for myself now, I'm much more tolerant, and I'm much more willing to try and help step in and diffuse that situation, or instead of getting confrontational, really try and bring myself down, to speak softer, to recognize, how am I going to help diffuse that situation, or say to the person, is everything okay? Are you all right? Did something happen to you? Right. And now I find that my children, I have a 14-year-old son, and there are times now where we will see somebody acting out or acting what we consider to be inappropriate for a particular situation, and he will turn to me and say, I wonder what happened to that person, right? Great. So like there's ways that we can start to impart that knowledge to younger generations, to other professionals. I think it's, one of the things we're going to be working on within the department. We have 6,600 employees, and our goal is to have...
In your department?
In our department alone.
Not statewide, just in your department.
In the Department of Children and Families, we have
Amazing.
6,600 employees. And so really working, over the next year or more to get them trained in what it means to be trauma-informed and healing-centered and understanding ACEs, so that they're much more able to respond in that way to the families that they interact with, or to the clients that we have. So we have a long way to go, but with the new Office of Resiliency in the state and, the work around, the ACE collaborative, and that we're going to be launching that plan is coming out in January, mid-January.
Wow.
And so,
Stay tuned, everybody.
Yeah,
I know I'm going to be waiting for that.
Yeah, it's excellent. And it's really, there's something in there for everyone. And we're going to be rolling out, an ACEs awareness campaign. So, from my perspective, I think the more we can make this information available so that people can just understand themselves and, why they relate to the world the way that they do, or, something that happened to them maybe in their childhood that still seems to be coming up and is an issue. I think once people begin to understand that, it helps them get to a place then of being able to heal it, or, wanting to work toward healing it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So as I was listening to you speak just now, I was hearing empathy. Right? Being empathetic, and it's not sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Right. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? And to understand, or to attempt to understand what it might be like to be them in that moment. So that empathy is very powerful. So even though I'm in administration now, I went to school, and my heart is a clinician, right? I love people. And but just the way things are, like the more education, the more credentials, the more licensure you get, the higher up the chain you go, and then you kind of get removed from direct care. But I make sure that I keep my hands in direct care because that's my passion. So I remembered part 2 of what I wanted to say, and because I have been throughout the years through the Children's System of Care a provider, an IIC, an intensive in-home counselor. So I want to say that. And one of my favorite things to do also is teach and just share my experience, because I've learned the most from the families and from the children. And one of the most profound lessons that I learned in my early years, right? This young girl, she taught me so much because she was living in squalor with her mother, and the mother was employed and had a lower intelligence, but the mom did work. But she lived in squalor, and the house was filthy, and the mom would have boyfriends that kind of interfered with her being able to be fully present with her mother. And then as a clinician, every time I would go there, and the family loved me, and I would always say to the mom, because she would tell me things, and I would say, I might have to report that to your DCP&P work because I don't believe in blindsiding.
Yeah.
And I would think, well, they're not going to want to work with me anymore because I have to report it. And she was always okay with me, no matter what happened. They just wanted me. So I was amazed by that. But it got to the point one day where there was such a confrontation because my clinical instincts, because as outsiders, we think, and as so-called expert, we think that we know better what's best for the child. And I was thinking, my goodness, I have to do something. I have to get this child removed because these conditions are awful and she's being abused. But the child did not want to leave her mother. Even the mother had said, I choose my boyfriend. I don't even want you. Have the system come get you. She literally said it, maybe not in those exact words, but that's what she said. They said to me, Melissa, go ahead, call them, have her come get her, because the boyfriend said it's either me or your child. And the mom said, I choose the boyfriend. But the daughter did not want to leave her mother. And it just taught me so much that who am I to know what's best for the child? Because really all the child wants is to be with their family.
Yeah, and I think that's a hard situation because as a clinician, and as an adult, you do know sometimes what's better for, a child. And because their children want to be with their parents, regardless of how negative the environment is or how harmful maybe it is. Children who have been physically abused by their parents still want to live with their parent. And so I think that is the really hard part of our work because it's important for us to keep children safe, to ensure that they are not harmed. And at the same time, they do want to be with their parent. And so how can we keep them safe? And that's our goal is now with other family or friends, even if it's for a short period of time, while we then work with the parents to be able to strengthen the parent and their ability then to be an effective parent. And not every parent is ready when we think they should be ready. And I think that's the challenge, that there's no magic to this. There's no recipe. It's going to take 3 months and then everything's going to be better. I think sometimes it takes 3 months and sometimes it takes 3 years. And in the case of substance use disorder, it's even more challenging because I think, I read that the average person trying to get sober or clean relapses an average of 7 times. So 7, that's the average. So it could be 14 or it could be none. But, it's how do we recognize and understand that that's the reality, that parents have their own issues and concerns and traumas that they're working through. They may be using substances to self-medicate for untreated mental health disorders or issues or traumas that they yet, have yet to acknowledge or even, fully understand. And so it's just, there's no one size fits all. It's not science. And I think it's why, as clinicians, or as a caseworker, or, in whatever kind of helping profession you're in, it's recognizing that, adults have the ability to make their own decisions, and, everybody wants to be able to decide for themselves what's best. And so it's how to support that at the same time, helping to keep children safe. And the goal is always to keep children safe with their parent. And, we're doing much more of that in the state now. We have, significantly reduced the number of children going into foster care. We have a lot more community programs and a lot more services available to be able to support parents, and children in the home. And, I think we're really going to try and continue down that path, so that children can stay with their parents, or if it's not safe, with family or friends, until they can get back with their parents.
Right. And chatting with Cumberland, one of our cool features is video box. So right now we're going to go to our video box, and we have two questions, one from Lorenzo McFadden from the Thrive Network, and also Nick Peck from the Department of Children and Families, which is Christine's department.
Good morning, chatting with Cumberland. Lorenzo McFadden here with the Thrive Network, made of Where Kids Thrive, Where Families Thrive, Thrive Institute, and Thrive Anywhere. To Frank and Beth, thank you so much for allowing me to attend one of your planning meetings and really see how all the magic began. And you guys are doing great work, so keep it up. Commissioner Norbut-Beyer, thank you so much for taking the time to answer questions. With our younger children now losing that socialization as well as the various supports they receive in schools, how are you seeing a change in the delivery of mental and behavioral health services to that population?
I think the challenge that we're all facing through this pandemic is not only recognizing some of the struggles that young people are having, and then their traditional support systems not being in place, whether that's schools, or in some cases it could be younger children, child care centers. And so as a result of that, it's trying to identify, what then the needs are. And I think, I've said a few times during our conversation today, that the social isolation, or children being isolated from peers and from supports, is really, we're seeing an impact on their mental health, behavioral health. And so we're continuing at the department through the Children's System of Care, to offer our in-home and in-community supports and counseling. I know that there are a number of schools that, are continuing to offer supports, or even through our own school-based youth service programs, even though things are not happening in person, and many things now are happening remote or through a video. They're still trying to connect, to engage young people in fun activities, not just all about school, but what are some other activities to try and help them continue to stay connected with their peers or with other adults in their lives that can, play a positive role or have a positive impact. But I think it's continuing, and it will be an ongoing challenge for us, if schools remain closed or as they remain closed, to be able to offer more supports for young people. And so, we are actually going to young people and asking them, what do they need? We have a lot of social media kind of campaigns for young people, phone numbers for them to call, hotlines or helplines, giving them information about the Children's System of Care, trying to, keep them connected. And then at the same time, talking with our youth council at DCF about, what are they recommending? How are they continuing to stay connected? Or what are they encouraging, other young people to do? So it's going to be something I think that we're going to be living with for at least, I would say, another year, depending upon with the vaccines and how that all rolls out. But at DCF, we're committed to trying to be creative in the delivery of services and, making services available through partnerships with the Department of Education or the Department of Human Services, and our local schools. So it's going to be kind of an all hands on deck effort, I think, to continue to be responsive to young people. And I think it's also, the best that we're going to be able to do is provide parents with resources and knowledge about what signs and things they should be looking for in their children, if they're starting to see changes in their behavior, in just how they're functioning within their family, to be able to then recognize if they need, further supports or they need behavioral health or mental health help that's more traditional. But I think it's going to continue to be a challenge. And while we're open to, continuing these creative solutions and really trying to, have a focus on youth mental health through this next year as we go into 2021, I think, it's going to be incumbent upon all of us, every adult, to be able to be paying attention to what's happening in the lives of children.
Thank you. And next, we have a question from Nick Pecht from DCF.
Hello, I'm Nick Pecht. I'm the Children's System of Care Liaison to the Children's Interagency Coordinating Councils, or CIACs. I have a question for Commissioner Beyer. This pandemic has impacted all of us, but in particular, it has been hard on youth who are going to school either remotely or in a hybrid model. Do Children's System of Care providers have access to coronavirus relief funds to help these youth face these challenges? And if so, what will that look like? Thank you.
So it's great hearing from Nick, and I know him and get to see him, or at least I used to get to see him in the halls. Now, sometimes, it's over video Zoom meetings. I think that we have released a number of coronavirus funds, relief funds, CARES Act funds that were federal that came down through the states. And, some of what we provided or gave organizations an opportunity to apply for funds was through PPE, if they needed PPE. And for me, it was important that we make money for PPE or actual masks, respirator masks or gowns or gloves available for providers so that they had the equipment to continue to see people face to face, that they could be in person with young people, still going into their homes if that's what they needed. An example is like our mobile response and stabilization services. And for those programs, we actually were also able to provide direct funding support to those agencies to keep them really afloat and thriving, because the mobile response, the way that that's funded is based on the number of referrals that they get. And so when the coronavirus first hit and people were really afraid and everything kind of got shut down, people weren't reaching out, families weren't calling mobile response. And so the numbers of calls that they were getting and the number of responses that they were going out on significantly dropped. And as a result of that, the money to the agencies to pay those staff was not there. And so New Jersey used some of our federal CARES funding in order to be able to provide direct assistance to those provider agencies to be able to keep them functioning and keep their lights on and their doors open so that they could respond in emergencies. So we also provided money to our congregate care providers, our out-of-home treatment providers, based on the number of beds that they had available for young people. So each of those providers, we gave them $4,000 per bed. So depending on the size of the organization, depends on how much money they received. But that was about enhanced services to young people in their facilities, as a result of coronavirus. So it could have been used to buy PPE. Some of it might have been used for overtime because with children not being in school, they were home in the facilities or in the residences. And so then they typically weren't staffing when kids weren't in the home. And so now there was additional staff needed, or there was, more educational staff or support that was needed on site. And so that money was made available to providers to be able to use any number of ways to respond to either their agency's response for staff, and then also based on, what clients or what young people may have needed. So there was a number of ways that we were able to use the federal CARES Act money or coronavirus relief funds. I keep using the two kind of interchangeably, but that money was, given out or sent out to Department of Children and Families, and specifically the Children's System of Care providers.
And welcome back to Chatting with Cumberland. I hope you enjoyed the 3-level segment that we just did with Commissioner Christine Norbut-Beyer, my son Nico Carrozza, and my amazing boss Melissa Niles. One thing that we want to get to close out the show, Commissioner Beyer, I'd like to point out two very special organizations. One is the United Advocacy Group, who have been our partners, and we're currently in studio with them. So thank you to Rich and to Ryan and our members of our team for this partnership. It's been amazing. The second partner that has also been there since the first day and the inception of this project is Hope Works in Camden, and my buddy Dan Kraus and Annie Rose Webb and their amazing team there. They take youth that maybe have trauma in their life or that have had issues or run-ins with the law or have issues at home, and they teach them how to code. And they are one of the greatest organizations I've seen doing the work that they're doing, and I'm a huge fan. And we're partnering up for season 2, so I wanted to introduce you. If you're interested in their work, it's hopeworks.org is their website. And Dan Kraus is their director. And Dan, I love you, man. Thanks so much for being a day one guy. So we have 2 questions from Alicia and Khadija of Hope Works in Camden that they'd like to ask Christine. Let's hear those.
Hi, my name's Alicia. I'm 23, and I am from Collingswood. My question for you today is, how can someone from outside the home help prevent ACEs from happening? Tune in, turn up, and get lifted.
So hi, my name is Khadija. I'm 26 years old, and I'm from Camden, New Jersey. So my question to you is, how are early childhood care centers trained in trauma-informed practice and early childhood development? Tune in, turn up, and get lifted.
Thanks, guys. That was Alicia and Khadija.
Awesome. So, I'm so excited that young people are actually talking about ACEs and adverse trauma childhood experiences and understanding that. And I think, to the first question about how someone from outside the home can impact or help, prevent ACEs from happening, I think it's being aware, recognizing maybe, what's happening in somebody's home. Hopefully, a young person is speaking out or sharing, adversity or difficulty maybe that they have going on in their home. But I think for adults, it's important to really be paying attention to young people, picking up on cues, even if they're not, able to completely verbalize what's happening in their home. If we are really connected and paying attention to young people, things that they say or don't say, actions that they take, decisions that they're making in their lives, all of that, I think, really can give us a clue as to what they've experienced in their childhood growing up. And so, asking them, being really, as an adult, being direct and being able to say, I care about you, I'm concerned about you, I'm wondering if, if this is happening to you, or coming out and saying what happened to you. And I think that's the way that, we can impact either directly in a young person's life, paying attention to them, being there for them, answering their calls at whatever hour that they're calling. But also, as a professional, sometimes it's, being able to then talk with a parent or, having an introduction to the parent if you don't already know them. But if you're working with the family, really trying to educate the parents on adversity and the impact that it has on young people. Finding out from the parent what they experienced in their own, early development or in their own life, and really trying to intervene to kind of break a cycle.
Sure.
So I think that it's really being attuned and paying attention.
Well said. And Christine, kind of in closing, a question that's very special to my heart. What advice would you give a young professional, maybe just getting into this field of work, of social work, or, maybe thinking about becoming a clinician? What advice would you give someone, let's say, that's 36?
36? I think I'm only like 36, so it feels like in my mind I'm 36. And so I think that any young person who's interested in entering this field or wanting, whatever the field is that they're interested in, I think reaching out to people that you admire or that you look up to, if you like something that you heard them talk about or something they did that was inspiring to you, making an inquiry, sometimes sending an email, sending a card or a note, asking if they would give you 30 minutes, 15 minutes, to just talk with you. You'd be surprised how many people will say yes. I think that, I have done that. I have people who say, I'm doing a paper for school, or I'm interested in learning more about the department, or I'd like to be commissioner someday. And surprisingly, there are a lot of young people who want to be commissioner. And, however I can be encouraging, or we can encourage young people to enter the field, or, I think the older you get and the more time you spend, you think back. I know I think back on who was there to help me, who are my mentors, and so I do want to give back. I do want to.
Who are your mentors? I'm curious.
It's interesting. I have one of my professors from Stockton, when I was at Stockton, Dr. Pat Reed Merritt, who was a professor at the time, and she just was so amazing to me in that she was working on, I remember her saying, working on becoming self-actualized, so it's kind of funny that
Maslow,
Melissa
right?
talked about, Maslow's hierarchy, and that self-actualization of the top of that pyramid. When I was in my early 20s, late teens, listening to her talk about that, it was just very inspiring. And she was someone who encouraged me, about just in the way that, she, gave me feedback, or, if I wrote a good paper, or I was, concerned about a particular internship or interactions with clients. And, she always gave me really good advice, but it was more watching her, listening to her, how she approached the world, how she approached people. That was very inspiring to me. And then, I think someone else that really inspired me, and I didn't think I knew it when I was young, but it's now that I'm older. I have one of my grandmothers who was single with 5 children, in the 30s and 40s. And the fact that she, really protected her children and made decisions in her life that would be hard for women to make today, that, were really unpopular or, not understood at that time. But that, she put the protection of her children above, all else. And so now, hearing those stories or, listening to my mother talk about her and kind of what she sacrificed, she's someone who I think about and I see in many of the families and the parents that, we work with. And so I think, she's certainly an inspiration.
Sure.
And there are a number of other folks that are just within child welfare or protective services that I look up to and admire. But it's typically people who are willing to step out on a limb and, call out what, may not be popular, but it's right. I think those are the people that I'm driven, to want to connect with.
No wonder I live out on the limb.
That's why I like you.
That's why
we
I guess that's why we get on so well, huh?
That's right.
It was really, a pleasure to have you, Christine, and thank you so much for supporting the project and for coming on. We hope that you'll return.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
This
door
is
is
so
always
much
open.
fun. I really appreciate being able to participate and that you actually wanted me on the show.
Of
So,
course, of course.
thank you for that.
It's our pleasure, really. And to all our viewers out there, we'll be starting season 2 filming in February. We have some very special guests. Our buddy Midget Moley will be starting off the show on criminal justice reform and juvenile justice reform. That's one of my passion projects that I'm very, very passionate about. So we look forward to giving you some great episodes. And once again, thank you, Commissioner Beyer, for coming in and for being such a good sport.
Yeah, thank you. And we're getting close to the end of the year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. So we thank you all very much, Commissioner Beyer, for joining us. And tune in, turn up,
And get lifted.
check you on season 2, guys.